share a few portraits of different types of people I've tried to capture in the last 3 or 4 years. This is an oil portrait I did of one of my friends and mentors, Vasily Rudich, who's had a very interesting life. He escaped a very oppressive regime in the 80s, and he's been a professor at Yale University for the last 20-25 years. He knows everything through books. When he reads, it gives him so much pleasure, and he's one of the greatest brains I know. So the next image is called Sacred Gossip, and I photographed this in one of the temples in Thimphu, the capital of Bhutan. And what I love about it is the playfulness of it. You know, monks are monks, but they're still young men or young boys. It reminds me of Arnold saying, you know, we need more sweetness and light. I love the fact that when people can have a sense of humour and enjoy life, we can't be too serious the whole time. You know, yes, they can be men of the cloth or whatever, doing their great enlightenment. It's nice to see that they're having a laugh at the same time. So this is the young priest who runs the Temple of the Divine Madman, and it's called Chimilaka. It's also known as the Temple of the Penises. And men, women, but in particular women, go there if they're having pregnancy issues, fertility problems. And you have lines of people going there. And I was able to photograph this young man who was looking after the inner sanctum there. Wise before his years, I think. So the next image wasn't shot in the Punjab or in Delhi. It was shot in Queens, New York City. It was shot at the Gurdwara Sikh temple. This man is interesting because I sort of came across him in the kitchen. He was washing dishes. And it reminded me of that whole journey, as I said earlier, from warrior father to sage. It also reminded me of that, I think it's a Zen Buddhist saying about enlightenment. Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. And there's this man here washing dishes, and he had this amazing presence, and of course this amazing beard. The next image I photographed in Jerusalem, two Hasidics in Jerusalem, where the Christian quarter and the Jewish quarter intersect, looking at something they wouldn't normally look at. I just love that sense of curiosity about the other. For me, so much of what we have to do is empathy towards something we don't know, as opposed to being frightened of something we don't know. The next image I photographed here in New York City, and it's really about the inner journey of the same man. This is a man who was from the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, and this is his journey, looking at himself. I photographed it obviously at 2 different stages in his life. One was a year earlier, where he still felt associated with the community from which he comes, and a year later he had decided in his own life journey to make some changes and to evolve. And I feel also there's a tenderness. There's not a judgment so much, there's a sense of evolution. And that's a lovely place to be, as opposed to saying, oh, that's bad because I'm not that anymore, or I don't like the future, that's corrupt. So this is karmic evolution happening. The next is a formal portrait I did of President Olusegun Obasanjo, who was the president of Nigeria 10-15 years ago. And I painted this portrait 2.5 years ago, and it now hangs in his presidential library in Abuja. For me, it was all about definitely the face, but also the costume. It was so sumptuous. You can call it a babarika or agbada. And I had such pleasure at trying to capture this light, and also hopefully trying to show a man. Of course, I met him post-power. Again, it's not for me to make judgments on the past. I'm not about that. I'm trying to understand a man or a human being when I meet them. I found he had a great nobility and a sense of responsibility, power, but also a somewhat melancholy reflectiveness. The next painting I did last year when I was attending a conference at Harvard University on East-West relations with the Harvard Kennedy School. And I got to spend some time with Right Honourable Kevin Rudd, who was Prime Minister of Australia, and he's really a great sinologist. I mean, he is an expert on China. He knows Chinese. He speaks Chinese like I speak English. He is an absolute example, a paragon of someone who is trying to build that bridge between East and West. And I know both sides of the table, listen to his advice on a regular basis. And I wrote down, first time I ever tried Chinese characters, I don't speak Chinese, on the right some pieces from some of his writing, explaining some of the ways in which he thinks East and West can avoid what he calls the Thucydides trap, which is when you have a hegemon power like the United States, which is losing its control, and you have a rising power like China. How do you avoid conflagration? How do you avoid war? And 17 out of 20 times you have war. How can we be in that space where we can negotiate the 21st century properly? It's vital what he does, and in my own humble way as an artist, I seek to try and do that too. I spent a day or two with Thea Leone, who's an actress here, based in New York City, and this was an oil on canvas I did of her reflecting between when she wasn't actually on stage acting. And I'm trying to capture something gentle but also very, very focused. She has a laser-sharp focus. She's a wonderful human being, and a gentleness at the same time. This next portrait I painted the Duchess of Cambridge's sister 2 years ago. I'm very interested in the roles we all have to play. We all play a role, and we have to blend that role with our public and private sides of our nature. Is it wonderful to be able to just to capture people in where they are in their current incarnation? The next painting is a real jump from the youth of the last two to a lady who was over 100 years old, and I painted her 3 weeks before she died. She didn't actually see the final portrait. She passed away. She saw half of it before. It was incredible. She was called Margot Wilkie. She was actually quite a well-known Buddhist, a friend of Bob Thurman. She had been practicing Tibetan Buddhism for 50 years. She lived on the Upper East Side. Quite a glamorous life, actually, and yet a Buddhist. Fascinating lady. Very strong personality, but I feel, looking at her there, she had come to her own sense of destiny and acceptance in this incarnation, and I think there was no fear left. And that's a very nice thing to be able to witness, where, going back to the plastic surgery, we're very frightened. This woman was not frightened. And in a way, it taught me something, that to live a good life is to prepare for death.